Look, surely we can all agree that the music the Fire Emblem series has produced is absolutely fire. Game after game after game, we have been fed bangers in droves, to the point actual musicians can only be jealous at the sheer number of phenomenal tracks. And that is exactly why I thought it would be interesting to look at the other side of the coin. What are the worst songs, tracks and themes in every Fire Emblem game? Now, before we start, some obligatory disclaimers. Music is subjective, arguably one of the most subjective things on the planet, I'd say. It's entirely possible that every song I pick here is your favorite, and in that case, well, don't send me your favorite playlists, but also feel free to disagree. And secondly, like I opened with, Fire Emblem has so many phenomenal musical pieces that even the worst song is most of the time perfectly fine. There are no off-key notes in this series, no people singing who really shouldn't be singing. So keep in mind that if I start talking negatively about a song, I mean that in the vacuum of Fire Emblem music, meaning it is objectively still a good piece with nothing inherently wrong with it, except for my opinion. With that all said, let's get this thing started with Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light, which actually kinda disproves everything I just said, to some extent. Because while the majority of this game's soundtrack is chiptune versions of songs we all consider classics, there are a few legit stinkers here that are simply way too repetitive and so get extremely grating after hearing them on loop constantly. Ironically enough though, hearing it too much is not really a problem for my winner though, which is the tune you hear now, Battle Map 3 Near a Victory, which plays when all enemies have been defeated and all that's left to do is seize the throne. Now, the main melody of this tune is actually really catchy and one I really like, but for some reason, the original version comes with a constant, never-ending loop of the same 4 bleeping notes. And I hate it. I absolutely hate it. It gets grating after like 10 seconds max, that's record time. And I don't think I'm alone in this opinion either. It says enough that when the song returned in Shadow Dragon DS, the main melody was kept, so the dum dum da 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 dum dum, and the bleeding loop was cut completely, never to be heard again. It was kept in Mystery of the Emblem Book 1 to be fair, but at the very least it's not as grating there anymore, even if I would still not exactly consider that an earworm. But we're not yet at Mystery of the Emblem. First we have Gaiden to tackle, and here, I'm sorry, but the winner has to be the worst theme Fire Emblem has ever seen. At the very least, Near a Victory has a semblance of a catchy main melody to intercept the constant looping of those 4 notes, but Undercurrents, which plays in dungeons, is literally the same 1-second loop repeated infinitely. It's an absolute assault on your ears, I genuinely can't describe it in any other way. And worst of all, unlike our previous winner, this one you can actually hear for potentially quite a while, if for example you don't engage in battle while traversing a dungeon. March to Deliverance and Whipmilla's Divine Protection are already some absolute bangers, but they feel like absolute salvation when they finally interrupt this grating monstrosity. Let's quickly move on to Mystery of the Emblem, where, like I said, Near a Victory is definitely not a banger, I would say, but it's not the worst tune ever either. Even though this game, thanks to being on a Super Famicom, has far superior sound quality compared to Shadow Dragon and Gaiden, I don't think it really uses it to its full potential yet. We still have some rather unpleasant short loop tracks, and the worst offender in this game is Scriptures of Naga, also known as Tapestry. This tune is part of the intro, so you fortunately don't have to listen to it repeatedly or for too much time, but that doesn't change the fact that it's just not very nice on the ears. The main melody is a little messy and repetitive, and even though this track does actually change over time, it's not a constant loop, I don't think these extra parts do much to really lift the overall quality. Plus, I know I did just say the sound quality of Mystery is significantly better than the previous 2 titles, but that doesn't really show with this one. It's not a nice sound, it's not clear, it has a grating edge to it that the other 2 Super Famicom games absolutely don't have. As far as I'm concerned, this is the last truly bad track in Fire Emblem history. From here on out, everything is listenable. Some are just more listenable than others. You know what? Scratch that. 99% of the music from here on out is listenable, but occasionally one slips through that sounds like Thracia Castletown. That said though, make no mistake, the OST of Genealogy of the Holy War is so far clear of the previous 3 games, it isn't funny or even remotely close. It's like comparing Michael Jackson's Thriller to my little cousin's SoundCloud page. But Thracia Castletown is a blast from the past. In the sense that it is an annoying loop that becomes grating in a few seconds, yet doesn't stop after a few seconds and just keeps going and going and going. It even occasionally pretends like it's gonna drop and actually become bearable, only to then start over again with the same thing. And we also definitely need to deduct points for the real possibility you'll actually hear this tune loop repeatedly, as it's played in Chapter 9's castle, essentially making it that chapter's preparation or menu music, depending on how you want to look at it. So yeah, here Thracia wins, but let's see who wins Thracia. And honestly, probably best song so far. Like I said, this is kinda the point where you sometimes have games that just flat out don't have bad tracks on their OST. So instead, I start to look at the music less as support for the game and more as music on its own. And in that regard, Barbarian Tribe, which you hear now, falls flat. I think it does what it sets out to do, it's fitting of the chapter it's used in, which is Chapter 2X by the way, the Pirate Isles, the one with Live as Pirates and all that. But as music, if I had to pick a song from Thracia to put on in really any circumstance, this would definitely be at the bottom of my list. The main horn is a little grating, suffering from the musical limitations the Super Famicom still had, and it's a pretty repetitive tune as well, even if it's not a literal 1-second loop like some other songs I know. It's probably my favorite song of the video so far, so to speak, but it's definitely the worst in Thracia, I would argue. Don't ask me why, but for some reason the Binding Blade decided to include a unique musical track for when the dancer Larum engages in combat as a regular unit, so without dancing. And maybe, just maybe, the composer thought this was so unlikely to happen, he just handed it some random leftover track for the situation. Because not only is this song incredibly annoying, it also feels very out of place. If Larum is fighting, that's bad news and you're in trouble. So then why is the soundtrack for it reminiscent of a medieval circus? And to make things even stranger, Binding Blades' songs for comparable situations, like healing and actually dancing, are really good. So that makes Dancer Battle, as the track is called, stand out even more in a negative sense of the word. Blazing Blade reuses several tracks from Binding Blade, but fortunately Dancer Battle isn't one of them. And whereas I just criticized it for not sounding as you would think it should, I'm actually gonna do the opposite for my pick for this game. Land of Swirling Sands admittedly does sound like a desert, but it's a little too predictable, too uninteresting and too unexciting in my opinion. The best way to get that stereotypical desert sound while still producing good music is by using interesting instruments that befit the region, but this is just desert music 101. Binding Blade was smart enough to just use cool chapter music during its battle set in the Nevada desert, and something similar should have definitely been done here as well. I cannot say that this tune doesn't evoke the vibe of a desert. In that regard, it sets out what it tries to do, but I like to think composers also try to make their music at least fun or interesting to listen to, and that definitely failed here, I would say. Deserts have been served some absolute bangers over the course of the series, so it's certainly possible, but Land of Swirling Sands simply goes for the easy route and suffers because of it. We move on to Sacred Stones, and this is gonna take the title from Thracia as the new best worst track. There is nothing inherently wrong about Twisted Shadows B, the enemy phase theme for the Lagdu ruins and the Tower of Valny, both skirmish locations, but it is definitely the weakest Sacred Stones has to offer. It's a little annoying, a little repetitive, and constantly switches between a fast and slow tempo in a way that doesn't really work, but most of all, it's just not really a nice listen as a piece of music. I will say it does fit the mysterious locations, packed to the brim with strange monsters, but it's not like Sacred Stones has themes that do feel out of place, so that's not exactly an advantage it has over the rest. So yeah, I have nothing to roast this tune with, there is no rant here, I just don't really like it as much as the rest of the game's OST. And basically the same thing applies to Path of Radiance as well, with the added bonus that this is the very first Fire Emblem game to not have to deal with any sound restrictions, seeing as it's now on home consoles. And that means that Path of Radiance is the first game I would say truly has a phenomenal soundtrack that I cannot imagine anyone really disliking. But hey, this is a video about the worst song, so someone's gotta lose. And that someone, it feels a little bad to say, is Abominable Memory. Look, you don't have to tell me what this theme is associated with, and I think it really fits the Serene's massacre very well. It's disturbing, odd, and combines the peaceful nature of the location itself with the horrors that happened there in a very beautiful way. But literally every piece of music on the Path of Radiance soundtrack is phenomenal. And this is one of the few themes I wouldn't really listen to as a musical piece. You could make the argument that it isn't meant to be, and you'd be right, but there are plenty of tracks in the series that weren't created for that purpose, yet I'd still listen to them separately. This one I wouldn't. So despite respecting what it is, I would still call it the worst song in Path of Radiance. Radiant Dawn follows in Path of Radiance footsteps and 2 has a phenomenal OST, but I will say, here I don't have the same level of respect for the eventual worst track. And that is, I would say, Silence Reigns, the Game Over theme. Maybe the idea here was to make it a bit annoying, so you would feel extra bad about dying and quickly resume the game, and if so, it worked, because something about this tune is very grating to me. Shrill is the word I want to use. I'm not a fan of the general sound of the instruments used here, and the melody definitely doesn't do it any favors either. There's honestly not much more I can say about it. It's a very bare bones song, and what is there, I don't like. So let's just move on and find out what theme is the worst in Shadow Dragon now that Near a Victory has been redeemed. And the answer is A Mighty Host Appears, the enemy phase theme for several mid-game chapters. Far from a bad track, I even have something positive to say about it, and that I like the distortion that comes in about midway through the loop. But the fact of the matter is that Shadow Dragon DS has a soundtrack filled with classic tracks with new energy breathed into them. Whereas A Mighty Host Appears is a new composition and gets overshadowed by the iconic pre-existing tunes as a result. While I do rate Abominable Memory higher, I would say that from a musical perspective, this is my new favorite of this video, which isn't exactly the highest praise you can get, but hey, it's something. Just like Near a Victory and Shadow Dragon DS, Scriptures of Naga is also significantly better in New Mystery of the Emblem, meaning we have a new winner and that is gonna be the first of a new, rather unpopular musical trend. Funny People is the first haha funny support theme, and while I don't really mind these as background tracks, I must admit that as separate musical tracks they're probably among the weakest tunes in the modern games. Funny People is not necessarily the worst of the bunch, but is the first, and as such feels a little more egregious than the rest. Now, don't worry, I promised myself I would only pick one of these tunes for this video, so for the games coming up I went with different picks to keep things exciting, but for New Mystery I feel like it's a logical winner to celebrate the dawn of a new horror, so to speak. We have arrived at Awakening now, which is where truly the modern classic trope of Fire Emblem having banger soundtracks comes from. Of course, the OSTs have pretty much always been good, but this one is the first that truly feels next level. And when talking about Awakening's music, we cannot skip past the hilarious song titles this game has. I mean, what game you know features songs like "Don't You Put Any Stock in This Destiny Hogwash" and "Ah, one gulp in my mouth, blah." That's enough positivity, we're here to pick the worst theme, and purely musically, I would say that something is very wrong. And yet, that is not the tune you hear right now. And the reason for that is that while I do think the spa version of the main theme is a better listen than Something Is Very Wrong, it's also just a weaker version of a song that already exists. And I don't mean the main Fire Emblem theme, FYI. The spa version of the main theme found in Awakening is nearly identical to the beach version of the main theme, the biggest difference being characters shouting being included for some bizarre reason. This is such a huge missed opportunity. It would have been so cool to have a peaceful, relaxing version of the main theme, and instead we get the beach theme with ha and ha shouted in between. Like, who approved this? And what does it have to do with a spa in the first place? It may sound nice and fun on the surface, but underneath, this track doesn't make sense. And worst of all, took something from us that could have been much better. I'm gonna be very honest with you, for most of the Fates tracks, I'm not a huge fan of the Hoshido versions. There's just something about the traditional Japanese instruments they decided to use that I don't like. For most of the similar tracks, I prefer the Nor versions as a result. And yet, I haven't picked any of these as my winner, because the lottery theme, officially known as Left to Heaven, is too annoying not to pick. Not only is it the soundtrack of repeated failure, it also just sounds like it's mocking your loss. And even if we didn't have that context, I doubt anyone would consider this a fun or interesting musical track. It's annoying. In my opinion, the most recent theme in Fire Emblem history that you can really consider to be grating. Look, I like minimalistic music as much as the next person, but Inviting Truth from Shadows of Valentia is really pushing it. All this essentially is percussion, and while it does sound imposing, I do think it could have done with a bit more to either transition into something or stand out, because right now it falls into the classic minimalistic music pitfall, and that is becoming background noise. If you're wondering where this plays, by the way, and why you may have never heard of it, it's only used in the DLC in several dungeons. And speaking of dungeons, huge shout out to the new versions of Undercurrents. It's not the best song in the game or anything, but it's a tremendous glow up from what it was back in Gaiden. Is Shambhala's Fire Emblem music objectively hilarious? Yes. Do I like listening to it? Absolutely not. Don't get me wrong, for the most part, I enjoyed it when Free Houses did some little experiments with dubstep here and there. For example, in the final boss themes of several routes. But those worked because they were smartly used moments. Shambhala is just a full-on dubstep track, and I'm sorry, but I don't like it at all. I mean, there's an entire drop in this and all. I get that it's meant to sound futuristic and foreign to classic Fire Emblem, but this takes things way too far. Not to mention that this is one of the few themes in this video to be a chapter theme. meaning there's a pretty solid chance you'll be hearing this on repeat for an hour, maybe more. And then it doesn't take long for this tune to get incredibly grating. Now, this is the song I was thinking of when saying it might very well be someone's favorite, because if you're into the genre, you might love this, but I am not. I absolutely hate it. It's a real blemish on what is probably my favorite Fire Emblem OST overall. And finally, we have Engage. And yeah, you probably heard it already, I didn't pick the controversial intro. I don't love it, I especially think the vocal performance is a little much, but I do kinda like it, especially the instrumental is great. Overall, Engage is a weird soundtrack by Fire Emblem standards, in the sense that it has few super high highs, except for maybe the Solemn battle track, but there are also very little lows to be found here. Even the haha funny support theme is pretty good. So I'm taking things from a literal music standpoint again, which track would I play least? And the answer there has to be Burned Earth of Gradlon. A sad, dark, minimalistic background tune used during cutscenes. That's very clearly more meant to set the scene and be atmospheric rather than a banger you listen to in your free time, but hey, like I said before, there are plenty of themes that aim for that, yet also make for a decent listen, and Burned Earth of Gradlon isn't one of them. And that have been my picks. But I would be shocked if you agree with everything I selected here, so please share your least favorite Fire Emblem songs in the comments. Or if you are that one person who has abominable memory in their workout playlist, now is your time to speak up. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on all my future Fire Emblem content coming up. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.